Yesterday, Sayadaw talked about the way the yogi needs to make haste, complete the task of noting urgently, needs to rush forward, needs to surge forward, seize and capture the object. And these analogies, in terms of their words, they may sound cruel. But these attitudes are not things that are to be expressed towards people. And the work of the yogis does not, these qualities of making haste, rushing, surging forward, seizing and capturing, are not done due to hatred. We shouldn't oppress people. We shouldn't oppress others. But one should not consider the kilesas our internal enemy. We should not consider the kilesas to be our friends. The attitude of wanting to fight off the kilesas comes from knowledge, not from anger. We have a disgust for the kilesas, and this disgust and despising of the kilesas is hiri and ottappa. Hiri doesn't want to get near to kilesas because they are just like feces. Kilesas are dirty, and if we have kilesas in our mind will be dirty, just as if we touched feces. And ottappa fears kilesas the way one would fear a hot burning ball. Who would want to pick up a hot iron burning ball? One doesn't want to be burned, and that's the fear of ottappa. So one would not want to pick up an iron ball that is smeared with feces, because one wouldn't want to get dirty. And if that ball were also red hot, one also wouldn't want to pick it up. So these qualities of hiri, despising the way that kilesas can make us unclean, and ottappa, fearing the way that they can burn us. Those qualities, if one has those in one's mind, one won't oppress others, but one will even despise the seeds, the very seeds of mental unwholesomeness. One won't want to have any type of unwholesomeness, whether physically, verbally, or mentally. And one will consider the kilesas that are the seeds of mental misdeeds, one will consider them disgusting and fearful. So hiri ottappa is kusala, wholesome. And if this attitude enters one's mind becomes civilized, cultured, gentle, and clean. In the Buddhist texts that the monks study, two qualities mentioned are hiri and ottappa. And these hiri and ottappa are called sukha dhamma, or dhammas that are like white, the white color. And the absence of them, or the opposite of them, ahiri and ottappa, are called kanha dhamma, which means that they're like the color black. So white is a color which repels heat, while black soaks it up. So if we live in a hot place, if we wear white clothing, we'll gain relief from the heat. On the other hand, if we wear black clothing, we'll become quite hot because the black will soak up the heat. And this is similar as with the way it is with cloth. It is with these dhammas. With the dhamma of hiri and ottappa, one won't accept kilesas in one's mind stream. But on the other hand, if one is lacking hiri and ottappa, then one will accept the kilesas, let them in. And The fire of greed will burn us when it arises. The fire of dosa will burn us when that arises. And the fire of moha will be present every time with lobha and dosa too. So if hiri and ottappa are absent, then it's like wearing black clothing in the heat. Hiri and ottappa are also called lokapala dhamma. They're the dhammas, the guardians of the world, the guardian dhammas of the world. They guard beings. Now, how do they guard the beings of the world? How are they the guardians of the world? If we have hiri and ottappa in our mind, our own little world will not be destroyed, our own world of our being. Hiri despises the kilesas, and so one who has hiri won't accept kilesas and therefore is clean. And ottappa fears the kilesas because they can cause pain. And therefore, avoiding the kilesas, one is peaceful. So with hiri and ottappa, one is clean and cool. So one who has hiri and ottappa will avoid misdeeds on a physical and verbal level. And with sati, if kilesas arise, they will dispel them with noting. And they will keep mindfulness as much as possible so the kilesas don't have a chance to arise. Now, eventually, when samadhi is good, the obsessive kilesas can become suppressed. And then, eventually, with past knowledge, the kilesas can be uprooted completely so that they never return at all. Hiri and ottappa are a great support to our practice. And one who has hiri and ottappa, who is in possession of this quality, will avoid transgressions that are so common in the world now. For example, they'll avoid incest. They'll avoid finding their partners among family members. Animals don't have hiri and ottappa. They don't have that capacity, and so they don't discriminate when they look for a sexual partner. So one who has hiri and ottappa will avoid that type of activity and keep one's own little world cool and peaceful. Hiri and ottappa, one who has this, will have compassion, and by avoiding misdeeds, one will not only protect one's own self, one's own world, but also will protect others by controlling themselves. So others' little world, others' own individual world will be protected. If all over the world people would have this Dhamma, the world at large would be a bright, cool, and peaceful place. The Buddha mentioned in many places the qualities of hiri and ottappa. That means that these qualities are very important for people, and they're important for yogis in particular. They're called the Deva Dhammas also, as well as being called the Lokapala Dhammas. So when we have hiri and ottappa, we'll want to overcome the kilesas. We'll apply energy in aiming. We'll create good quality sati so that the mind sticks to the object, and we'll get to the point where we can even uproot the kilesas, the latent kilesas. And if we could increase hiri and ottappa in the world at large, make it a strong quality in the world would definitely be bright. For an individual who has hiri and ottappa firmly in one's mind, that yogi will progress quickly. Sayadaw is saying that we should not have compassion for mental defilements, for the dirt of the mind. is a way of saying we should have shame and fear. We should have shame and fear regarding the mental defilements. One who has this moral shame, hiri, and moral fear, ottappa, will see misdeeds, will see all levels of misdeeds as disgusting and fearful, and therefore will avoid them. And this is important to understand. And such a one will make as much effort as possible in the practice and will be able to suppress the obsessive kilesas, the pariyotana kilesas. And when knowledge becomes complete, they will become completely free of kilesas. So gradually, as our knowledge builds, we become free of the pull of kilesas and free of wrong views. So Sayadawji's saying yesterday that one doesn't need to be soft for about kilesas, which one should not have any compassion. No compassion is needed for kilesas. What he means by this is one should have hiri and ottappa, moral shame and moral fear. If we make effort to know the arising object as soon as it arises, sati will develop, sati will stick to the object, the mind will fall collectedly on the object, and kanika samadhi will always be present. And then the obsessive kilesas, the pariyotana kilesas, will be suppressed. If we aren't practicing respectfully, if we're not practicing continuously, if we're starting and stopping, taking rest from our noting, then this amounts to having an attitude of ahiri and anottappa, lack of shame and lack of fear about the kilesas. So if we fail to observe the arising object, then concept arises. We see concept. And if concept arises, then we think, well, what is this? And we don't know the true reality if we're seeing concept. For example, when we note the object within our own body, when we go from standing to sitting down, what happens is nama and rupa occurring in a series. But we won't know this. We won't know this, and if we find something, if our mind finds something pleasurable in the process of sitting down, if we're not being mindful, then we'll take pleasure in it. And in addition, for example, if our mind happens to be aware of the arm, we'll think, this is my arm, this is my body, this is me sitting down. So we won't see the true nature. We won't see that this is just mind and body. If we look at another person, instead of looking at ourselves, if we look at another person without mindfulness, we'll think, who is it? Is it a man? Is it a woman? So both when the object is internal or also external, if we're not noting the present moment, then there's no sati. That means there's no effort to note the arising object. And if there's no effort to note the arising object, there will be no sati, no concentration, no collectedness of mind. So this happens when in the world, one sits down ordinarily. One doesn't know the true nature that is occurring. One doesn't know that sitting down happens due to the intention to sit down. Due to a series of intentions to sit down, there's a series of physical processes that are sitting down. And when we know, we come to see this. If we don't know, what we see is santana panyati, the concept of the whole. We'll see this concept, Santana Piñati. And if we see something that we like, if we see something that seems good to us, we'll like it, and then greed will arise. If we see something that seems bad to us, we'll dislike it, and dosa will arise. So this not knowing, we won't know that this sitting down process is a series of cause and result events. And not knowing this is avijja, not knowing. It's not knowing, and it's knowing wrongly. Knowing wrongly, we think this is us, we think this is me. If we note the presently arising object with energy, then, and with aiming, vichara will develop and sati will stick to the object, and the mind will fall calm and collected on the object. With energy, we overcome laziness, and sati protects the mind from the entry of kilesas. And the mind falling calm and collectively on the object, when that happens, there's no room for dosa or lobha to arise. So with these three factors of energy, sati, and samadhi, we are suppressing the obsessive kilesas, and the mind becomes peaceful, very peaceful and clean. Why? This is because of application of the energy to note the arising object. And the result is that we gain mental stability. When we sit down, what happens is that there's an intention to sit, and the process physically of sitting down that occur in a series of intentions followed by a series of physical events. We don't sit down because another person orders us to sit down. We sit down because of the intention to sit. And this intention to sit is mind, mentality, in Pali called nama. And the body sitting down, going down, is physicality, rupa. There's just these two in the process of sitting down. There's just nama and rupa. So we can't note before it happens or after it happens. We have to note the sitting down process as it happens. And we put our attention on the body that is sitting down. Why this is because we need to give preference to what is obvious, and the physicality is more obvious than the mentality. So, but by placing our intention on the physicality, we come to know mentality as well. We come to know the mind. When we put our mind on the body, that is sitting down at the moment of sitting down, we can feel heaviness as the body goes down. We know this true reality. Sometimes what we know is the intention, the desire to sit down. So we may know one or the other. We note the arising object according to the method of Satipatthana, and when we do so, the mind falls collectively on the object, and we're free of the disturbance of the kilesas. We're free of the movement that is created by lobha, dosa, and moha. Our aiming is a helpful support in this, as well as applying effort to note the arising object. As Sayadaw mentioned before, these qualities of lobha and dosa are opposing qualities that we overcome in our practice, the Nivaranas, the qualities that oppose kusala. When we practice according to the method of Satipatthana, kilesas can't stick to our mind, and therefore the mind is clear so that we see. We come to see when we observe the sitting down process at the moment that it happens, we see that there's a series of sitting down events that are physical, and we see that there's a series of mental events, intentions. We no longer see the concept of the body sitting down. We just see the heaviness, for example. So sometimes we know the physical elements, and sometimes we know the mentality. We know one or the other. And this is why Sayadaw said, note the arising object in order to see the truth. This is how we do this. Every time we go from standing to sitting, if we don't have sati, the way we are doing now, if we don't have the practice that we are doing now, then we think that it's a body, which is santanapina. Or we see the process of sitting down. We see sitting down, which is also a concept, this akara panyati, the concept of manner. But in fact, what is really happening is the intention to sit down and the sitting down process. We don't see that yet if we have no sati. But if we note a lot, the concept of body and the concept of the manner of sitting down both disappear. And then what we see, sometimes we see the intention to sit. Sometimes we see the physical elements of sitting down, heaviness and so on. We are seeing nama and rupa, mind and matter, which are true reality, and these are not easy to see. Because they are not easy to see, they are deep. And although what is really there, these real dhammas are there, although they are deep and hard to see, when the pariyotana kilesas are suppressed, overcome by virya, sati and samadhi, then the mind becomes clean. And when there's enough cleanliness, when the mind is full of cleanliness, then we'll see these dhammas which are really there, nama and rupa. Sayadaw said, one might ask, why is it that these dhammas that exist within us, nama and rupa, the mind and body, why is it that if they're so hard to see and if they're so deep, how is it that we can see them? And the reason is that, yes, it's true that they are deep. This nama and rupa that make up ourselves. These are within our body, existing in pairs. This nama and rupa are together in our existence. They are deep, but with the suppression of the opposing factors, raga, dosa, moha, and the other Nivaranas, with their suppression, these dhammas become very evident. We suppress them with energy. We suppress the opposing factors with energy, with aiming, and with collectedness of mind, with virya and sati and samadhi. And when we can do that, the Nivaranas, the opposing factors, have no chance to arise. And therefore, this subtle Dhamma of nama and rupa becomes very clear, very evident. If we don't note at the moment of arising, then concept arises. And when concept is what we see, then kilesas arise. We don't know. If we don't note at the moment of sitting down, we don't know that it's just a process of mind and body occurring in a series. So not knowing, moha is present. And we also know in the wrong way. We think, I'm sitting. The concept of I is there. So in every moment where we don't know, at the moment the object arises, there are kilesas. And when kilesas are present, there's always a minimum of 4, which are, first of all, moha, delusion, not knowing or knowing in the wrong way. And also, there's lack of hiri and lack of ottappa, ahirika, which is lack of shame regarding kilesas, and anottappa, which is lack of fear regarding kilesas. And also, if we don't know at the moment of sitting down, there will be restlessness, udicca. And this is a quality which, when it's present, the mind cannot stick with the object. The mind just gets scattered. It flies away from the object. These 4 are always present when kilesas arise. And because these are present, we see what is just mind and body. We see it as a self. We see it as I. In fact, there's no self. There's no inherent I in any of us. There's just dhammas, mind and body. For example, when we sit down, the intention to sit and sitting. There's just mentality and physicality. When we see this in our practice, we become free of the view of self. When we sit down, when we go from standing to sitting down, there are many intentions to sit that occur in a series. And these are mental, so they're called nama. And because there's a group of them, they're called kaya, nama kaya. And these intentions are followed by many physical sitting downs, many units of sitting down. And these are physical, or rupa. And because there's a group of them, they're called rupa kaya. And this is what is really there. So it's called sakaya. Sa is short for santa, and it means this is the group, this is the collection of things that is really there, sakaya. This nama and rupa. When we don't see this, but instead we see a self, that is called deiti. Deiti is seeing in the wrong way. It means false view. So this false view of self is sakaya deiti. It's a false view regarding mind and body, which are really there. So ordinary people who don't note every single moment, for them this view is arising, this false view about their mind and body. And this is a subject that Sayadaw will continue tomorrow night.